Well, good evening, everyone. This is the April 8th meeting of the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee. Everyone should be connected. If you're going to be muted when you join, you'll just need to unmute. The presentation is recorded, and we're going to post that to the Washington County Solid Waste and Recycling webpage within a week. If there's any call-in attendees that join us, we will give them time for comment. The Q&A is enabled, so they can enter questions there. They can raise their hand, and then we can also, for anybody calling in on the phone, allow during the appropriate times for them to be unmuted and ask any questions. And just remember that only the committee chair may recognize a public attendee. And that ends the technicalities on that part.
I think we do have a quorum, Ken, so you can go ahead and kick us off. And you're muted.
I'll press my space bar. How's that work? Well, let's get underway. So we'll start with everybody introducing themselves. I'll start. I'm Ken Foote. I'm chair of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, public member. And I don't know how to go around the table because we don't have a table.
I'm Tom Eggleston. I'm the Solid Waste and Recycling Division Manager and a non-voting member of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. And I'll pass it to Carl.
Carl Peters, Recology Industry Member. And I'll hand it over to Vinod.
Vinod Singh, Far West Recycling, an industry member. And I'll pass it over to Sandra. I like this game.
Sandra Smith, public member, unincorporated Washington County. And I'll go, who's next? Beth.
Beth Vargas Duncan, industry member, and I'll pass it to Kathy.
Kathy Christie. Oh, well, I'll introduce myself. I'm Kathy Folsom, and I'm a senior policy coordinator with Washington County.
I don't think we've had Sue Shade yet.
Sue Shade, I'm public member, and I will pass it to Ashvin.
Ashvin Nagaraja, public member.
Thank you all. And
we have two more staff from Washington County. Aaron, and Megan, you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Aaron Stein, Operations Supervisor for Solid Waste and Recycling.
And Megan Schuler, Education and Outreach Supervisor.
And I know we do have Kathy Christie in the tile. So Kathy, if you're there, we see you, but we don't hear you yet. So thank you. Oh, you're muted, Ken.
okay, let's move on to the next thing. I can't look at my agenda while I'm looking at this, so go ahead. And now you're muted, Tom.
Yeah, okay. We're getting off to a rocky start here. We're going to go ahead and next agenda item is solid waste and recycling updates. I'm just going to kind of try to go through a couple real quick. We do have a couple agenda items, and I know Carl has to peel out a little early, so it'd be nice to get him through some of the stuff here. So real quick, Ridwell and James Recycling. We talked about these last month. These are companies that are attempting to offer curbside collection services for hard to recycle items, plastic film, textiles, batteries, light bulbs, namely. We are continuing to have conversations with them. We responded to Ridwell in a letter informing them that Washington County deems their business to be currently in violation of county code. And we're asking them to have a conversation with the county in regards to several clauses in Washington County Code Chapter 8.04 that they may pursue in order to legitimately operate their business. So we're working on scheduling follow-up conversations with them. We're also planning to offer James Recycling the same offer we sent to Ridwell. So that'll be a continuing conversation. I assume any pathway forward would come through this committee. So there will be continued and future conversations with this committee about those businesses and those services. Senate Bill 582, now -9, is the Modernizing Oregon's Recycling Bill. There was a public hearing in Salem today. It's got -9 amendment, 102 pages long, so it's a doozy. It's still being worked. I don't really know what the next steps are. I'm assuming it would go into a work session and then committee will vote on whether it goes out of committee. I think there's a pretty strong expectation it'll get out of the Senate Environment and Energy Committee. And then from there, the fate of it is a little less certain or confident is my understanding. So there's been a lot of work to kind of respond to some of the challenges and the issues that the industry has had with them. And when I say industry, I mean the producers, namely, in terms of truth and labeling and those kinds of efforts. So the DQ is trying to work on responding to concerns and being flexible. It was actually interesting in the hearing. I watched it today. There was the producer industry side saying, it's just not there for us. And then the environmental lobby saying, it's just not there for us, which maybe is a good sign you're right in the middle. So I don't know where it's going to go, but we'll see as they keep making that piece of legislation. Next month is a busy month for the committee. We have 2 items coming. We're going to be talking about solid waste collection rates at our May 13th meeting. We are anticipating we will need to do some type of rate action this year. And that's driven largely by some preliminary results that we aren't confident enough to share much about with yet. And also anticipation or knowing that Metro is going to be raising the tip fee by $15 a ton in July, and responding to that and following through on some commitments we made to the Haulers Association in regards to recognizing that impact on their businesses.
What are the tipping fees now?
Oh, it's $100 about, and it's going to 115 about. 15% increase essentially. We will also be discussing and reviewing a franchise agreement with Recology Oregon Compost. So we've been working with Recology, with Carl and Amy Lecoq and Nick Olheiser at Recology, and their franchise agreement for the formerly known as Nature's Needs. I think it's now Recology Oregon Compost North Plains. Is that right, Carl? That agreement is going to be coming to the committee for a recommendation to the board. Bylaws that the committee voted on last month are scheduled to be in front of the board on April 20th of this month, so a couple weeks from now. And we haven't heard anything yet. We've submitted the materials. They should be posted online a week before the meeting. So I think next week sometime those materials will go online. And we had one suggest or requested change Kathy sent out. It was kind of clarifying I think everybody understood the intent was that if there was a industry or a public member that wanted to speak to an agenda item, that that was an opportunity for them to do that during that agenda item, and the chair would call on them to do that. So we kind of clarified that a little bit in the bylaws, and we sent it out, and we only got a couple of responses that didn't seem to have any problems with them. So we went ahead and included that in the package we sent to the board. Finally, the Japanese beetle eradication project north of Highway 26 in the Cedar Mill area is continuing. They are, I think, year 5 now, and they're doing well. They're winning the battle, they feel like, so they are going to continue fighting it. There is going to be another quarantine this year, this spring, summer, and they are going to continue to request a waiver for franchise fees at the Hillsborough landfill so they can direct bury the waste that's contaminated with the beetle, Japanese beetles. So we will probably be going to the board on a consent agenda item in May, and it's a pretty administrative, so it won't necessarily come through the committee in regards to that either. But just to make you aware it's happening. They're asking for a 5-year waiver. And I think that signals that they are confident that they're going to keep fighting it until they beat it. They've done a good job, and I think the numbers are down 60–70% over the height of it. So they feel like they're on the upper edge of eradicating the Japanese beetle. And that's the updates I have. Any questions? I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Yeah, I would just add on that 582 that buyer's made it pretty clear that he intends to move it through after Tuesday. He's doing what it takes to, and then it'll go to the Ways and Means where they'll probably tweak it a little more and people will weigh in, because there was some things that, like you said, the producer said we wanted something different. The other people said they wanted something different, so people will probably try to get more amendments in there. And then like I said, who knows what goes from there. So, but it's probably got a little more legs in it. So he just wants to get it as close to as workable as he can, and he knows that he stated he understands that it won't be perfect, but he wants to get something moved through.
Thank you, Tom. Has anyone signed up for, do we have anybody to oral communicate?
Not this evening. We don't have any public attendees.
Okay, that being said, let's move to the presentation on multifamily recycling rules implementation plan.
All right, that's me. It's nice to see you all again. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Do you see the slides? All right. So I'm sharing Megan Schuler, Education and Outreach Supervisor, and I'm sharing an update on the multifamily renewable service standard, recycling service standards. And this is a chance for me to give you context for the rules update that Kathy's going to be sharing, and give me a chance to hear your input on our implementation plans to date. I want to start with a reminder of why we're updating our regional service standards. Metro conducted a study back in 2017 of recycling and garbage services at multifamily properties. And they found that there's inadequate capacity in a lot of cases, just not enough collection containers, or they aren't conveniently located, aren't collected frequently enough, which can lead to overflowing and make sites inaccessible or unsafe. They also found that collection containers are inconsistent in size, color, and labeling, and that's understandably confusing to folks. As much as 50% of residents move in a given year, and they're seeing something different at each place. And they also found that bulky waste is inadequately managed. We also know that enclosure design doesn't necessarily allow for adequate capacity of containers or additional capacity needed to handle bulky waste. So to achieve equity and address these issues that they're seeing, Metro's, with significant input and engagement from community and local governments, has worked to develop some rules to address this. We're going to be establishing a minimum level of service applied to the number of units at a property to ensure that there's adequate capacity for their garbage and recycling. Establishing regionally consistent colors for receptacles and the associated educational materials. So blue is recycling, orange is glass, gray is garbage, whether you're in Gresham or Forest Grove, it'll be consistent. And that we would have consistent signage that's the same whether you're at home or at work or at play. That includes wayfinding symbols and images that resonate for multifamily residents. Now, Metro's just starting to scope additional requirements for bulky waste and enclosure standards. We're at the table for this and expect to have an update later this winter about progress towards defining what that might look like. And before advancing slides, I just want to make a note on service equity. We know from regional data that median income for renter households is far lower than that of homeowners, and that communities of color continue to experience disproportionately low home ownership rates compared to white households or the population as a whole. So when we talk about this work addressing service equity, this is really about making sure that we have equity in the community, in our low-income communities and BIPOC communities, and how they're experiencing our waste and collection services. And I also want to note that it's a statewide expectation that multifamily tenants receive recycling education at move-in and at least once annually. So that's not a change, and that expectation will continue, and it's an important part of reducing barriers to service. So how will we achieve this? These are the responsibilities and next steps. Washington County and jurisdictions, our cities are responsible for adopting updated rules and code. So Kathy's going to be updating you on that shortly. And to support folks, we're going to be making our language available to cities as a template. Haulers are responsible for applying decals on newly ordered and painted receptacles, and all containers have to be labeled with the new decals by the end of 2023. To support this, Metro is leading an effort with third-party contractors to remove old decals and apply new ones to those receptacles that are currently in use. And that's happening over the next 3 years. And our staff are going to be contributing to that effort as well. And the county is responsible for providing enclosure signs to properties. Property managers aren't required to use those, and it's really just expected to be used only as enclosure design allows. Haulers are responsible for following new color coding standards for all containers distributed after July 1st, 2022. All customers must have color-coded containers by July 1st, 2028. I know that's a long timeline, but that follows the existing depreciation schedule and is an effort to minimize the cost impact to customers. Haulers are responsible for providing properties with a minimum level of service, and that will be effective upon adoption this summer. Based on a 2020 survey, we estimate that under 10% of the 760 properties in Washington County fall short of that standard for garbage. So not a lot, although we expect more may be missing service for glass or need additional recycling capacity. To support this work, the county is going to be working with haulers to identify those properties that fall short of that minimum service standard and offer to contact them and make them aware of our new service requirement and let them know what to expect. And we plan to work collaboratively with haulers to support bringing these communities up to that minimum service level. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we're responsible at the county for continuing to provide education and technical assistance to properties. And this includes distributing a Clean and Green Property Manager newsletter, which is being sent quarterly to 400 properties. It includes our annual print newsletter, which is sent to all residents, as well as proactive visits planned to 100 sites in the next year, prioritizing those in low income and diverse census tracts. All right, so I just want to share briefly just our current plans on monitoring our progress towards compliance. For stickers, Metro is going to be recording our progress on restickering, relabeling containers in an app, and Washington County will receive an annual summary of progress on that effort. For adequate capacity, we're going to be working with haulers, as I mentioned, and supporting changes for those properties that fall short of that expectation. And so we'll have a close tabs on how we're progressing through that. Container color. We plan to generate a representative sample of accounts for each hauler and ask to have them report whether those container colors have been updated. It's a way to make sure that that cost is being distributed over that 7-year time period, and hopefully in a way that's a fairly light lift. And so that's kind of just a smattering of things we'd be doing to kind of in that self-reported progress space of just making sure that we are keeping tabs on progress towards compliance. I mentioned we'll also be doing field observations with these 100 properties that we're going to be visiting. This will allow us to just do some early testing of monitoring and verification strategies before the compliance deadline. You know, we have a 3 to 7 year on-ramp for a lot of these things. So we're not looking at monitoring compliance anytime in the immediate future, but it's a chance for us to just kind of be getting those field observations, aggregate that information, monitor change over time, and make sure that we're prepared to monitor progress after compliance deadlines. And staff will continue to respond to complaints and support tenants, property managers, our cooperative cities and haulers on resolution. And following the compliance deadline, that will be an additional method of monitoring compliance as it relates to these new standards. So I'll stop sharing slides and see if you all have questions.
So this is Ken Foote. With regard to the color coding,
yeah.
Regardless of what the IRS says as a write-off period, I think dumpster containers last a lot longer than 7 years. Are you expecting the haulers to go pick up all their ones in the field, bring them in and spray paint them a different color and then put new signs on them?
Yeah, so Tom, you took yourself off mute. You can jump in.
Yeah, over the next, over by 2028, that's the expectation for multifamily properties. And so Megan mentioned all of Washington County, including the cities, is about 700 properties. So yes. And the reason 7 years was picked, Metro had a consultant kind of evaluate different cost options. It was like a phased approach, a 7-year approach, or an approach that would be cost neutral. And I think their estimation was 22 years, I think, for the cost neutral approach, which just didn't seem like a viable approach to getting color coding in place. So they landed on 7 years, which is the depreciation cycle for equipment that's used in the rate setting process. And for containers, you're right, Ken, I'm presuming it's being painted, repainted, which has cost, yes, absolutely. Roll carts likely replaced the entire cart because the colors, especially orange, there's not orange carts out there right now. So they're all gonna have to be new carts. It is multifamily, so I'm not anticipating many roll carts, but it will be another new equipment purchase.
So the condo association I live in, which is 62 units, is it considered a multifamily, whatever?
Yes, over 5 units, it's multifamily.
Okay, we have really nice enclosures. So
Good.
are you grandfathering in existing closures or how are you handling existing ones?
So all that,
yeah, go ahead, Megan.
yeah, it's being scoped now, and that is the expectation, is that this is really applying to significant remodeling projects and new construction. So these would be design standards that must be met.
Yeah, we currently do site plan reviews for multifamily new construction. So if a site plan comes in for pulling a permit, we have to sign off on it through what they call a service provider letter. And so we evaluate like if it's enough enclosure space, if it's the right area. Oftentimes it's one of the last things that's considered when they're developing a complex and they put one enclosure off in the corner and we look at it and know the garbage hauler can't get into it. It's going to be a disaster. So we're able to catch it before they get through the permitting approval process. So I anticipate that enclosure standards coming out of Metro might update the rubric we use to evaluate whether it's an adequate enclosure or not. But still it's going to be a big challenge with existing stock. There's no, I don't think there'll be a requirement to go back and make apartment complexes built in the 70s do remodels unless they're already pulling permits for new remodels. Then they might be asked to add an enclosure element to their major remodel. But there's existing stock is one of the biggest challenges that we face in the field in terms of multifamily enclosures. There's some that are wholly inadequate just for recycling and garbage as it exists today.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Oh, go ahead.
Nope.
Who had a question?
Oh, I was just asking if anybody else had questions.
Okay. I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, I expect that we'll be back with updates maybe later this winter and as it relates to those enclosure standards and bulky waste and just keep you apprised of progress as we roll out these new requirements.
How big a bulky waste? Are you talking about mattresses and sofas or?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Furniture and the likes. Yes.
Thank you, Megan.
Yep. Thank you all.
Thanks, Megan.
Feel free to hang out or not. It's up to you.
We'll sign off. It's been nice seeing you all.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Somebody's going to talk to us about solid waste and administrative rules. Kathy? Yes.
Yes. Good evening. As Ken mentioned, I'm Kathy Folsom with the Solid Waste and Recycling staff. I'm here tonight to present the proposed rule amendments to our current administrative rules. It's been a number of years since the rules were revised and changes have occurred that necessitate a general update. The administrative rules establish the standards for general provisions of the code, including definitions, reporting, education, promotion, and residential and commercial collection service standards. I can group the proposed rule changes into 4 general areas. The first one relates to what Megan just presented on. These are revisions that enact the Metro code changes that include cart colors, receptacle colors, minimum collection volumes. It's 20 gallons per unit per week for garbage, 20 gallons per unit per week for recyclables, and 1 gallon per unit per week for source separated glass. It's not a huge amount, but there's never been a minimum service levels. So hopefully that will bring more service to some of the multifamily properties that maybe have been underserved. Additionally, I made some minor, several little housekeeping changes that maybe the formatting was off or there were spelling errors, things like that. Secondly, there are revisions centered around equity, diversity, and inclusion considerations, including identifying the collection of personally identifiable information that is needed to establish or change service. And this would include things like your name, your address, your phone number, not your social security number, things like that, as well as provisions that the haulers will provide training on implicit bias. And also we're addressing procedures related to customers with limited English proficiency and translation services being available at no cost to the customer. Thirdly, we addressed miscollection. Currently, the rules read a lot about weather events and school closures, but we learned last fall that widespread fires also can have a large impact due to the poor air quality on the ability to collect your garbage and recycling. So we're proposing changes that add language centered on hazardous conditions as opposed to making it follow a school closure, for example. There's also sort of policy changes. We're proposing that the time for collection for residential and multifamily be increased an hour to allow for collection up until 7 p.m. Right now it's 6 p.m. It seemed like a reasonable request, and there may be times where having that extra hour allows service providers, for example, to catch up on their collection when maybe collections have been missed. It also aligns with our noise code, so we're proposing that. We made a clarification on the qualification criteria language for customers that want to receive non-curbside or non-roadside collection and not incur a distance charge. It used to reference the criteria used for handicap parking permits. Now it points to the Oregon Revised Statute definition for persons with a disability. And then finally, there will likely be further policy discussions about possibly instituting a subscription service for extras that aren't included in your monthly bundle of services. For example, extra yard debris collection. As you may remember, we've mentioned a couple times that Clean Water Services used to pick up, do a leaf pickup in part of unincorporated Washington County. They have since ceased doing that, which caused a large number of customers to request additional yard debris collection service. We've been in discussions with the haulers about this, and we're going to collect some information over the next year that'll help inform more. We'll most likely need a rate change, but this is more like just the service itself. Should there be a minimum term to take an extra service that's not part of your regular monthly service? So you're likely to see that come back to you at some point in the future. In terms of the review, we sent the proposed rules to the Washington County Hauler Association in December. They sent written comments back in January. We've met with the Washington County Hauler Association a couple of times to discuss the issues and proposed rules as a result of those meetings. Many of the issues raised in the written comments were resolved and are reflected in the draft rules. Additionally, I presented the proposed administrative rules to the committee in October and then at our last couple meetings ago in 2021 for discussion. Though we haven't received any of the written comments, we have engaged with city representatives and other local jurisdictions who have also reviewed the rules. In terms of next steps, the draft administrative rules will be scheduled for a board work session and review in either May or June. Therefore, my recommendation is that the Washington County Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee favorably recommend to the Washington County Board of Commissioners that the proposed administrative rules shown in attachment A be adopted.
Thank you. And I'll move just that. So if somebody will second, we can move on.
I actually have one quick question, Kathy. And maybe it's where you're on page, it's just more maybe why it wasn't included. Page 10, number 3. You mentioned adverse weather or natural disaster, and then you mentioned hazardous conditions down below, but is there a reason you didn't put it up in that opening sentence?
Let me give me a second, I'll find it. So
I didn't go through this very thoroughly because I figure you guys have been beating it up for years, but.
So number 3, I got you there now.
So
If you
page
could
10,
repeat
number 3,
your
well, it just
question.
says that imposed by local authority, adverse weather, or natural disaster. But then you mentioned specifically hazardous conditions, and that's the fire incident, right? Is there a reason you just didn't put that up there too? Just a grammar thing.
I don't think there was any grand
Maybe.
scheme one way or another. I think we thought adverse weather might include that, but I could see why maybe that's not considered a weather event.
It doesn't really matter. It's not an issue to me. I just
could put
Yeah.
other hazardous conditions, something like catch-all like that, right?
Yeah, I just thought because of
disaster.
Yeah, because we ran up with that with the fires, like you mentioned, that all of a sudden you have this. What do we do now? It's not a, some people are still working, some people aren't, some schools are open. So.
Yeah, I think I thought of it as a natural disaster, but I don't know. There's probably some term of art that maybe a fire is not a natural disaster, but an earthquake is.
And I just had one more question. So you guys mentioned specifically the materials collected. Would this have been a place to change what's collected in some way? And it's what caught my eye again. Sorry if I'm not trying to be a troublemaker, but like the metal, 36 inches and 40 pounds is a pretty big hunk of metal to be pulling off of a sort line. And I don't know how that number, because maybe that was a number when it was a single line, and it's not going across.
Those particular descriptions haven't changed in years.
I know.
So.
That's why I was asking, would this be the place to maybe change that, or something like nursery pots that don't have a good market and they're bulky, rigid. It's almost a junk plastic. Is that something?
I think this is a place to talk about it, Vinod, but we have committed to be consistent with the region. So we would be real hesitant to propose any changes that weren't in line with what the region has done. But I do think it's a valuable conversation, and it's a conversation we need to have with our regional partners, because we don't want to have a list that's different than Hillsborough's, that's different than Beaverton's, especially as we work in a cooperative program. So we're providing education and outreach services on behalf of the cities as well. So consistency is of the utmost importance for us in that sense.
Okay. And I wasn't looking to be a spoke this late in the race. So
I also would just mention that it's our thought that we will be coming back with another rules package, like within maybe a 12-month period. This is kind of a rolling project. as other items come up. So, you know, there will be ample time, I think, to have more sort of policy discussions, of which that would be a good one.
Oh,
Maybe
sorry, I
SB
had one more question too.
Maybe SB 582 will give us a statewide list.
In 2026 or hey, what this is just a question. So on page 9, is it number 6? And so the hauler will provide recycling only. And that kind of piqued my interest, because why would you have recycling only and not trash service? And where was there trash?
No mandate to take you there. It's not mandated in unincorporated Washington County that you have to take garbage service. And we do have some, that's one reason. We do have some customers that don't take garbage but want the recycling.
Okay.
You also,
is
I
that
think
a,
those
is that
are
for free?
No, there's a charge for recycling only if it's by
Okay,
itself.
okay.
I think those situations, there's examples of sharing garbage service with a neighbor or a duplex or something along those lines and separating recycling service. I think that's one example, but I would beg to say that it's probably very rare that someone's in the recycling only service.
That makes sense to me. It was just my suspicious mind that, oh, I only need one can. So.
It's $533 a month for urban and $801 a month for rural.
Okay.
So
sorry,
if you can
I
reduce your garbage to 0, but you still want someone to pick up your cart, which seems weird because you're getting rid of your garbage, and in some other fashion, why wouldn't you just take care of your recycling too? But we have it there just in case.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, I had a question also on the food scraps part of the very last page. It's just the notification date and the compliance are just crossed out. Does that just mean it's permanently on hold?
It's been delayed because of the pandemic. And so we used to mimic or mirror metros. These are metros, mandates. And this is a perfect example of why we're getting rid of the actual dates and we're just pointing to Metro's solid waste administrative rules. It's because it changed twice. And so it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, but we can't say with certainty that it will stick with the current expected date either. So instead, we'll just point to Metro and whatever it says in their rules, that's the dates that would be expected for our businesses that fit into each one of these groups.
Yeah, you'll see Ashwin right above in C, big C there. We crossed out according to the dates in the table below, and we said as set forth in Metro's solid waste administrative rules, because they've changed them twice. The hard dates, it was originally delayed 1 year to March 31st, 2021, and now they re-delayed it to March 31st, 2022. So we wanted to not have to change our rules if it gets delayed again, so we can just reference their rules for the implementation date.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
No other questions? Okay. Well, again, we have no attendees, so we have no oral communication that I know of. Does anybody have anything else they want to bring up?
I just had a question. Do we need to, is that minor wording change of me inserting the hazardous conditions mean that the recommendation is amended or not?
I think it's a pretty minor change that we could just take it forward to the board because it's, the intent is there. So it's a good catch by Vinod.
I'll send them out again when they're updated too, so you all can see them.
Well, thank you all. Have a great evening. And
we need to vote, and we don't have a second yet, Ken.
Oh, right. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Lost track there.
I'll second the motion.
All right, is anybody opposed? Fine. It passes.
So is that considered a unanimous a pass for us, or?
Yes.
Yes. I see thumbs up and head nods. Sandra, you good? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It's a big rule package, and I would also say I appreciate the work we've done with Beth and the Washington County Hauler Association. We had some really good conversations, and I think we're really appreciative of their willingness to do some of these efforts, especially on the equity, diversity, inclusion side of things, working with their employees on implicit bias training and offering those translation services, and working with us on the personally identifiable information piece. So shout out to the haulers and Beth for helping organize those conversations and meetings, and we really appreciate the movement on that side of things.
Well,
Thank you.
Likewise, right back at county staff, and it was really helpful to have enough lead time to really be able to get into these and have some roll up your sleeve conversations. So we appreciate that as well, and the back and forth and willingness to make changes. So thank you.
All right, look at that, 42 minutes.
Yeah, isn't that great? Thank you all. We'll see you next time. Next month? We're gonna
May,
we're gonna talk about rates.
May 13th.
Okay, great.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the April 8th Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee. This video recording will be posted in 1 week's time to our website. Have a good evening.